Благодаря на Крейг, който в доказателство за доброто си приятелство с Балканите дойде тук в годишнината на сватбата си. Това е жертва, която малко от нас биха направили. За мен е удоволствие да представя Сандра Брека от Робърт Вош фундацията, която през годините беше създаде, може би, най-успешната мрежа от млади хора и политици тук на Балканите, изгради я, поддържа я и е наш дългосрочен партньор в тези инициативи. Сандра.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I also would like to join Craig Kennedy in thanking the Prime Minister for his excellent introductory words. I would like to thank Niki Mladenov, the Foreign Minister, for this initiative, and of course his team, and Craig for many of the things he said, which we as the Robert Bosch Stiftung can definitely subscribe. As I entered today, just an hour ago, this hotel, I thought, well, it feels a bit like in the 90s. We've just grown older, all of us. Of course, there are new faces, but maybe just to follow up on what Craig said before, there would have been more people from European Union countries and the United States 10 years ago, and that has changed tremendously. If you look at the agenda, putting the Balkans into a global context, thinking how the Balkans can solve their own problems, but also help solving international problems and maybe share experiences and best practices. We have a very different agenda than what it would have been at the end of the 90s, in the middle of the 90s, or even in 2003 when we, together with the German Marshall Fund and other European foundations, established an international commission on the Balkans, the third of its kind at that time. And when that commission, of which Carl Bildt was a member, published its report, The Balkans in Europe's Future in 2005. A lot has changed to the better, but not everything, and the problems are quite subtle. And I can only speak from the experience we as a foundation have in bringing together many different people, whether it be journalists, young people, parliamentarians, photographers, people from civil society, or public servants in our programs. But we realized that many years ago the problems were very, very harsh and difficult to solve and very imminent, and yet the people who talked to each other knew each other and knew each other's realities very well, whether they liked them or not. Today you bring young people together who come to Berlin, who maybe have been to European Union countries, but who have not been to each other's countries still. So we are talking about a phenomenon that actually was one very important part of the Commission's report in 2005. We're talking about quite isolated societies, at least in those cases, in which the countries are not yet a member of the European Union, and even if there was a visa liberalization subject to very big restrictions in traveling. So we are talking about generations who grow up now not knowing each other and whom we want to, vote in a pro-European fashion. That is a lot to ask, one has to say. Or if we invite photographers together with World Press Photo to have a master class and to produce new perspectives on their own countries and their neighboring countries, and you look at the results and you feel quite saddened because what they show is a pretty bleak, both economic and social reality in the region, which still has to be addressed. I guess we all know which challenges we are talking about, and the sort of decreasing commitment of many of the organizations which have been active in the region over the past years, over the past 20 years, is one of the big issues. We came in much later than the German Marshall Fund. We essentially established our focus area, Southeast Europe, in 2003, when, most of the crises were not solved, but when there was no imminent war anymore, but we are there to stay. However, it is quite difficult to find partners, whether it be public or private partners, who will support this, and we are grateful for such partnerships like with the German Marshall Fund and some of the other, in particular, larger European foundations who are there to stay for the next years. Because what we need to do is still open up the region and essentially develop a voice for the region. I come from Germany, and if you talk to parliamentarians today, the region is not only not a priority, it's not, on the agenda at all if political decision makers don't have to deal with it every day. And I think Graf Lambsdorff from the German Foreign Office will, in one of the later sessions, continue on that theme. If you talk to parliamentarians today, enlargement is almost a taboo, and nobody wants to talk about this European future of the region at this point. On the other hand, we have a big date coming up, which is 2014, where I guess many in Europe will be looking at the last century on that continent. And 10 years ago, 2014, for the whole region, still seemed this very hopeful date. Today we know that in 2014 many of the issues won't be solved, and many countries still will not be part of the European Union, so there is a lot to do. However, we are committed to do anything that gives a voice to the region in our countries, in the European Union and beyond, to do our small part, as Craig also mentioned, because as a foundation you can only do so much to support this process. But what we need is public attention. We need media coverage, and of course we need the activity within the region to establish itself on that global platform. And I think that this conference contributes to this in a great way, and I hope it will not be the last of its kind. I wish all of you very interesting discussions as of a few minutes, and hopefully a continued dialogue, and maybe we will really do what Nikki said, identify those who are young, who come up, who will carry the future of the region, because I think a lot of it is still carried on the shoulders of those, who have done this over the past 20 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you very, very much, Craig, for being partners in this project. Thank you, Prime Minister, for those words of encouragement for the region. Almost 100 years ago, in 1914, we have the symbol of the beginning of senseless destruction in Europe. It took about 20, if not more years, for people to start coming around to the idea that Europe needs to unite to make war impossible. I hope that 100 years after 1914, in 2014, we will be able to make war impossible in the Balkans by making sure that as many of our neighbors have acceded to the European Union. And I know this is not on the agenda, it's not a fashionable topic to discuss these days, but we have strong allies among our friends who are here and in the rest of the continent and across the Atlantic in the US that we need to continue working very, very intensely for. We've got a couple of years to get the job done, and a good and strong team of people committed to peace, security, and the prosperity of our region. So let us once again thank our opening panel and give us a couple of minutes so that they can leave and we can set up for the first panel and the rest of the session. Thank you very much.